Welcome back to the Frank Sontag Show, our final hour for the day and the week. And we're going to cover many different topics in this short time. For those of you that are on hold from the last hour, we're moving on. Appreciate your thoughts. We'll obviously revisit them another time on another program. But for this hour, we're going to transition into a number of other areas. First and foremost, I want to read a commentary by a man many of you know. I see him every day here at the radio station. He is on our sister station, AM 870 The Answer. He is a syndicated talk show host and founder of Prager University. I'm talking about Dennis Prager. He has a new commentary, and I want to read it to you. With everything going on in the world and in our country, it's entitled, Men Give Birth. America was founded in 1619, and Israel is the aggressor. Dennis writes, when you meditate for a moment on what the left expects honest and decent people to believe, you confront the world of absurdities and lies in which we live. The left demands we believe and announce that men menstruate and give birth, and that it's in no way unfair to girls and women when biological men compete in girls' and women's sports. In the tens of thousands of American schools, students are brainwashed to believe that America was not founded in 1776, but in 1619, the year the first Africans were brought to North America as indentured servants or slaves. This is the 1619 Project lie. It was labeled a lie by almost every leading historian of early America, many of whom are Democrats and liberals who supported the impeachment of former President Donald Trump. And now with Hamas, a totalitarian theocratic Islamist terror group, unleashing thousands of rockets on Israel's civilian population, and Israel responding to this latest of repeated attempts at mass murder, the world's left demands that we believe Israel is the villain and Hamas is the victim. Prager writes, the left's condemnation of Israel and sympathy for Hamas is just another example of the morally inverted world the left has constructed. We live in a world in which the mass media and academia, all nothing more than mouthpieces of the left, repeatedly tell the world that America fought the Revolutionary War in order to preserve slavery, that men menstruate, and that Hamas is a victim of Israeli aggression. How such gargantuan lies have become mainstream truths is a question for another column. Suffice it to say, they are all as absurd as they are mendacious. The reason there is a war right now between Israel and Hamas is that Israel exists. It has nothing to do with anything Israel has actually done. Hamas and its backers in Iran do not have disputes with Israel. They have a dispute with Israel's existence. There is therefore nothing Israel can do that would satisfy its enemies except agree to destroy itself as the one Jewish state in the world. Dennis Prager goes on to write, for most, not all Muslims, and for most, not all Muslim states, and for the left, there is room in the world for 22 Arab countries and for more than 50 Muslim countries, but there is no room for one Jewish state, even one the size of New Jersey and smaller than El Salvador. Hamas and its supporters in Iran regularly announce they seek Israel's destruction. There is no parallel to this in the world. No groups or nations seek the obliteration of any other nation in the world. This is in keeping with the history of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is not just another ethnic or racial bigotry. I wish it were. Anti-Semitism, unlike every other form of racism or ethnic bigotry, is exterminationist. Jew haters don't merely hate Jews, they want Jews dead. That's one of the many reasons that every honest person understands that anti-Zionism is merely the latest expression of anti-Semitism. The anti-Zionist claim is that Israel's existence as a Jewish state is illegitimate. Why do those on the left, again, as I always point out, leftists, not liberals, deny this? Well, they do because the left hates the good and often supports the enemies of the good. Leftism is a moral sickness in the human condition. Prager writes, as I have previously written, it is not even an issue of the left having a broken moral compass. A broken moral compass is occasionally accurate. The left's moral compass always shows north as south and east as west. That is why the left hates America. Precisely because it has been, in Abraham Lincoln's incomparable words, the last best hope of earth. And that is why the left hates Israel. With all its flaws, Israel, too, has been a moral beacon. Israel's prime minister has just tweeted out a video made by Colonel Richard Kemp, the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, released by Prager University shortly after the last Israel-Hamas war in 2014. The title of the video says it all: Israel, the world's most moral army. In Kemp's words, quote, I was the commander of British forces in Afghanistan. I have fought in combat zones around the world, including Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Macedonia, and Iraq. I was also present throughout the conflict in Gaza in 2014. Based on my experience and on my observations, the Israel Defense Force, the IDF, does more to safeguard the rights of civilians in a combat zone than any other army in the history of warfare, which is why the left hates Israel. It's morally better than its neighbors, not to mention its enemies, just as America has been. But if you believe America was founded in 1619 and that men give birth, you'll also believe Israel is the villain in its war with Hamas. Dennis Prager. 888-528-2557. We have a wide open board. It is Open Phone Friday now in our final hour. If you have any thoughts, questions on anything, your phone calls are more than welcomed on just that. Again, anything. The media is something I want to share a moment about. The ever-changing face of the media. How many of you know who Laura Logan is? If you watch 60 Minutes at all in past, or you peruse some of the mainstream reports about worldwide events, you'll probably know who Laura Logan is. She recently did an interview about some of her concerns about where the media has digressed. The Epoch Times has a piece on her, and I'll read a few of its segments. State of the media in the United States has shifted over the years to the extent that the industry is no longer recognizable, says former correspondent of CBS's 60 Minutes, Laura Logan. Quote, our profession today is unrecognizable. It has changed dramatically in the nearly 3 decades that I have been a journalist, and in many ways not for the better. Born in Durban, South Africa, Logan spent much of her time as a young journalist covering rallies by the ruling party at the time. She said that what stood out to her then was that journalists never showed partisanship, bias, or personal feelings toward members of the government. Logan said, quote, I'll never forget that when I think it was the president stopped speaking, and everyone applauded, but none of the journalists did. That was where I learned you don't show as a journalist your partisanship. And nobody in the press corps did. That was just a standard then. It's really a symbol of the separation that journalists tried to put between themselves and the politics of the day. And think about where we are now. Laura Logan shares that certainly was not an evidence in the last administration. These are all quotes. It was truly shocking to me during the 2016 presidential campaign to hear and see journalists and newspapers of record, even any attempt or pretense or trying to be objective, and rally behind these political operatives and political organizations to ensure that this person doesn't get into office. Of this article, here's probably the most telling sentence. Many journalists in their reporting now blur the lines between fact and opinion, criticizing reporters, as Logan shared, who rely on anonymous sources in their pieces, something she argues can be exploited to conceal motivation. Quote, sourcing is so important, and today that's just been completely obliterated for the worst possible reasons. To give cover to the political operatives and people with political motives. To spread disinformation that harms the profession of journalism. Logan shared that is a disgrace to every one of us who call ourselves journalists. And most importantly, it's really harmful to the ability of the American people to understand and know the truth so they can try to make the best possible decision. They're not journalists. They're political assassins working on behalf of political operatives and propagandists who do not care one bit about real journalism or honestly anything like that. Logan also suggested that media entities are working hard hand in hand with big tech companies to shape narratives and public discourse. Companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Google have drawn intense scrutiny for perceived political bias and alleged unbalanced moderation of users' content. Logan shared in closing, what it's all about is absolute control. If they control the narratives, they control this flow of information. They control what we report, what we don't report, how we report it, what we do with it, what people say about it. They manage perception. They distort perception. You can find the entire article at theepictimes.com, Laura Logan. I grew up way back when, oftentimes you hear about Walter Cronkite, David Brinkley, a time where journalists were real journalists. Not this this gang of folks that we see now. And Laura made reference to the previous administration. How combative the press corps was, and how then President Trump didn't take it, gave it right back. But now we live in a new era. We have a new administration, a new president. The media is just fawning all over. You may have seen recently, there was a high-profile media report about the love affair of the Bidens. Oh my gosh, they're going to change the world with the love they have for each other. And the media just fell all over themselves, falling lock, stock, barrel right behind this ongoing narrative. Where's real journalism? Brit Hume is part of the old guard, if you will, that knows literally what true journalism is, and he was on Tucker Carlson recently talking about this love affair that the quote-unquote media has with the new administration.
So, Britt, I watched you, and I don't want to date anybody, but I watched you literally as a kid cover our federal government from the Congress, from the White House lawn, and I never heard you once ask any politician how that person's love story was going to heal a nation. How do you assess questions like that?
Well, it's gushing coverage, and it's something that when I was coming along as a reporter, no matter how you personally felt about a politician, favorably or unfavorably, you just didn't introduce that or show it, and you certainly never gushed. And when a politician was promising all kinds of wonderful things, you never announced that they were going to achieve them. What you said was that they said they were going to achieve them. And you said that you kept your distance. You didn't make their opinions and statements your own. You kept a distance. And this was a set of customs, not so much of objectivity. Nobody's really capable of that, but of neutrality, in which you approached everything. And you disciplined yourself as a journalist not to allow your personal feelings to infect your coverage. You kept your distance. And what I think has happened, Tucker, over the past several decades is that journalists have collectively, the press collectively, always had power. We discovered during Watergate how much power individual reporters could have. You know, 2 reporters from the Washington Post did very good reporting, by the way, that ultimately led to the downfall of a president, a hated president, a president particularly, you know, he was a Republican and basically a conservative, hated by the media. And they found that they had this power. And they've been itching to exercise it in any way they could ever since. And then along came Donald Trump, and the process really accelerated because journalists took the view, you know, it was consonant with their own personal views, that this man's presence in the White House was a national emergency. And the old restraints were completely abandoned. And we had this headlong pursuit of the story that ended up having nothing to it, really, about Russia collusion, but it looked so much like the kind of story that could bring a president down they couldn't resist. In the meantime, something else, Tucker, has happened, I think. And that is that the country has grown so big that, you know, advertisers turned to newspapers because they wanted the biggest possible audience. But nowadays, if you only have a niche audience, in a country this big, it can be big enough so that you have something advertisers want. And then there's, on top of that, there's this. The New York Times is the best example of it. The New York Times is increasingly turning to to revenue from subscriptions. People buy these online subscriptions. It's worked very well. The Times is doing very well with it. But now, instead of being beholden to advertisers, which was never really much of a problem, these journals are beholden to their subscribers. And their subscribers, if you're the New York Times, they're on the left. So those readers get a steady diet of just what they want.
I just think, though, and I understand all of that, and I think that's a really smart analysis of what undergirds a lot of these trends. But you got to think at the level of the individual reporter, if you find yourself on a Sunday at your computer typing out a story that begins, Joe and Jill Biden's love will heal this nation, that your self-respect is going to be offended. You got to think to yourself, I'm not anybody's flunky, I'm not going to rewrite a press release for some politician. People don't seem to feel that way anymore. They're happy to.
Well, I think one of the things that the Watergate era, and I repeat, Watergate was good reporting. The story was real. But I think what that era ushered into journalism was a lot of people who wanted to exercise power. And, they came in, they had a side, and they took the side. And so you get this, really harsh coverage of Donald Trump. There was really no effort in mainstream media to treat him fairly, to report on the things that he did that illustrated his faults, which are legion, but to acknowledge at the same time, the things that he had accomplished, and to report, what the results were. And that didn't happen. I think it's just because reporters now are activists using journalism to advance their own political agendas.
That's for sure. And degrading themselves.
So you end up gushing over Jill and Joe Biden, which you'd think would be embarrassing, but apparently not.
You'd think it would be. I don't know. It's just amazing. Britt Hume, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Britt Hume, one of the best, still doing what he does best, and that is real journalism. We have a wide open board. Save Brian in Tahunga, who wants to talk about mandatory vaccines. It is also Open Phone Friday. Anything and everything. Your calls are welcome. No one topic is open for discussion or debate. If you have any questions or comments at all, we have 5 open lines. 888-528-2557. And when we continue, we'll take some calls. We have an update on the pastor in Canada who was arrested last week. Something happened at his home in the last few days, and it's not good. Scott Atlas is in the news talking about lockdowns as a heinous abuse of power. And the House approved a commission to investigate the January 6th breach at the U.S. Capitol. the greatest insurrection since the Civil War. That's what the left pushes on us. 500,000 people died in the Civil War. One person died on January the 6th from a gunshot wound, and she was a Trump supporter. We're going to have now a commission to investigate the breach at the U.S. Capitol. That'll be interesting to watch. How about you? What are you fascinated by? What are you following? Is there a news story you want to share? How's your faith? Are you going to church this weekend? Or do you have a question? Just about anything. Again, phone lines are open, 888-528-2557. You are welcome to call as we continue with more of this, The Frank Sontag Show, next. Welcome back to The Frank Sontag Show. Thank you for joining us on this Friday. We have a little more than 30 minutes remaining in this broadcast, our final one for the week. We have a couple of open lines, 888-528-2557 are the call-in numbers each and every day. We're inviting you to participate in Open Phone Friday. Anything and everything, questions, comments, whatever. In fact, we have some calls on hold that are both wide and varied. And I've got some stories and articles I want to share with you, but let me take some calls. We're going to talk to Brian and then Martha. And one of the calls on the screen is something we've never even gotten into, which we'll talk about with Martha in a moment. But let's talk to Brian. Brian in Tujunga, you're on the Frank Sontag Show.
Yes, Frank, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Brian?
Got a question. Fine, thank you, sir. Just picking up my daughter from her AP test here at the school. Same school that your kids go to, actually.
Oh, my goodness.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
It's affecting my brother-in-law. I just got a call from my sister, and she was saying that his employer, they're in a Zoom conference, and he's over at a company that's an entertainment company, and they are going to be requiring that he get the vaccine in order to come back to work.
Right.
And his stance is that, as I am as well, we do not, want to get the vaccine. We want to, continue our lives. Being cautious is fine. And, that there's reasons that we have that we're not going to be, that we don't want to be vaccinated. I just want to know what your thoughts are. And unfortunately, if he doesn't get the vaccine, he's going to be terminated from his work, and that obviously will affect his livelihood and, the ability for him to support his family.
Yeah. Well, let me respond, and I'll put you on hold. Brian, thank you, and I pray that you and your family have a blessed weekend. This is something we're going to hear more and more about. Now, let me just start off by saying I have no clear, definitive answer. But I do support anyone's right to say, I choose what I choose to do with my own life. And this whole push to take the shot, to me, there's something insidious about it. This is my own personal view. As it applies to the question, we heard early on in all the lockdowns, churches, you can't meet, and you will be pressured, arrested, fined, right? We see all of this imposition into our own privacy in a whole array of the ways in which this play out. The vaccine is just one. I call the vaccine. I don't believe they're vaccines, but for the sake of identification, this is the latest now, where an employer somehow is going to tell you, if you don't take the shot, you can't come back to work. And my own personal view is, I think we're going to have moments in our lives where we're going to have to make some deep decisions based on integrity and ultimately our faith in Christ. But to force someone, for me, again, I don't want to go long here. I want to get to Martha. There's so much wrong with the narrative going on right now about take the shot, right? Here's one of the primary things that I absolutely stand against. You don't have a right to infringe on my own free will. You can't force me to do anything. That's against my own personal freedoms. But yet we see now incursions into law with religious freedom. I had Jack Phillips on the other day. This guy's been in hell for 7-8 years, fighting lawsuits because they don't want him to make a cake the way he chooses to make a cake by his own religious convictions. Financially, he's been destitute. So we have these moments in life where we have to make these decisions. And so I also do know through time, all of this will be clarified. But I try never to make a decision based in emotion or fear. And also, there'll be lawsuits. There'll be people that will probably be wrongfully terminated. They will file a lawsuit maybe 2 years down the road. We don't know. They may be vindicated. We may come a day when people say, we look back and how did anybody buy into the lie that you have to, in order to stay gainfully employed, you had to do something against your will, like take a shot that is not FDA approved? We saw in California recently the ruling against Governor Newsom with churches. Churches now in California by law can do anything they choose. And yet for how many months did Newsom threaten and push back, and certain counties would fine churches, but now the church has been vindicated in California. But how did pastors respond? Not all the same. So I do pray for, I think you said it was your brother, I pray that he will come to a decision of peace and that he will stand on the side of justice for sure. Martha are you in Arleta? Is that what it says? Martha, you're on the Frank Sontag Show. Oh, Artesia.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, Frank. Hi, Frank. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm going to try to be as precise as possible. So I've been in several relationships in my life where none of the men that I've been with have been Christians. So I met a Christian person through a Christian dating site, and I've managed to keep the relationship for this long. However, I've been facing with a lot of doubt whether or not I should marry this person for two single reasons. First, I don't feel like I'm in love with this person, and second of all, I'm not 100% attracted to him. So is there anything to advice or passage you can refer me to so that I can get that kind of help to decide what I should do?
Why are you in a hurry to get married? Why is marriage in the conversation here?
I've been struggling to live a godly Christian life, and I'm over 40. I would love to be married and have a family, God willing.
Okay, you dropped out there. Here's my response. First of all, I don't give advice. I'm not a professional, but I surely can give you a little feedback and some life experience and things and thoughts that come to mind. My first thought is, I don't think being in love with somebody is the main reason by which you would get married. I think there are a lot of people that are in love with each other, get married, fall out of love with each other, and somehow they think that love was enough, or that type of love is enough. Romantic love is not real love. Now, I'm not speaking against falling in love with somebody. That's kind of fun and great and all that stuff, but to make a decision for marriage based on being in love with somebody, I just my own personal take, I'm not necessarily in that camp. Whoop. Let me put you on hold. There's a lot of feedback. The other thing I want to say to you is, you said you're not necessarily attracted to him. I'm not you. That would be important for me. But here's the bottom line. Only you know your relationship with God. And I get the biological clock is ticking. You said you're 40, you want to get married and have family. I get all that. And to enter a marriage, to have its best shot at truly succeeding and thriving, is that both of you are committed above all to serving God in your marriage, not each other. And I know this is somewhat an anomaly these days, especially even some people that call themselves Christians. But if we look to each other for our own happiness and our own sense of whatever it is, we're setting ourselves up for misery. It puts a lot of pressure on the other person to somehow, and I'm not talking about you specifically, Martha, I'm talking about just the whole dynamic of marriage and relationships. So many people think, even websites, you made mention of websites, they pair people based on compatibility. Here's a truth that I know for me. You do your own survey. The overwhelming majority of people that stay together for long periods of time in marriage, as time goes on, and there are exceptions, but mostly they are so incompatible with each other where they don't have a whole lot in common. But when you think about websites, they base pairing on compatibility. And I don't think that sustains through much of anything other than maybe through kind of a fun initial period of time of dating. And again, I don't want to speak out of line here. I'm not an expert, but I think God has a way of drawing somebody to you that's almost your opposite. That initially we're drawn to them because they have so many qualities that we don't have, and we're attracted to them. And those very same qualities that you're attracted to early on, through time, you ended up being repelled by them. And that's when, here's one example. I don't want to go too long. I'm going to break here. But we haven't talked about this on the program in forever. The first year of marriage, society kind of puts forth, oh my gosh, you get married and you go on your honeymoon and it's incredible. And oh my gosh, we're married. And the first year of marriage is often so difficult because of power struggles and literally life-changing realities, that what society puts forth as a message and the reality of the message couldn't be in further conflict with each other. Like if you talk to anybody, the first year of marriage, they say it was very difficult, all the way to it was awful. So commitment is of the essence. Don't just rely on being in love. That comes and goes. But true love is about commitment and action. And there is no guarantee. You can be happy in love, married, blissful for 50 years, and the likelihood is one day you're going to wake up and one of you will be without each other, because that's just the way life can be. I hope and pray that helps in some way. Thank you, Martha. And you can talk to all sorts of experts. They'll have all sorts of opinions. So there's some of mine. Take it or leave it. 888-528-2557. We have two open lines. And I've got some stories in front of me I want to get to as well. More of the Frank Sontag Show as we continue next. Welcome back to the Frank Sontag Show, our final segment. We're going to get to it. 888-528-2557. We have a few lines open. Open Phone Friday, anything and everything. If I was your teacher today in the area of creativity, I'd give you an F. All the calls are about the same thing. Now you may say, "Oh, you're harsh. I don't like taking your class." Yeah, well, here it is. Open Phone Friday is anything. If you have a question about specifically anything, sports, music, reading, the world, faith, health, relationships. We just talked to Martha. That's open for discussion if you have any questions. And also your comments, again, on anything that you find yourself spending a lot of time investigating. Phones are 888-528-2557. Took a call from a man that talked about, I believe his brother is facing getting fired over not taking the vaccine. How about this one? Authorities in New Hampshire arrested a Sunday school teacher who was attending a school board meeting without a mask and was protesting the board's mask mandate, according to attendees and family members. Kate Bossy, the mother of a child, attended the Timberlane Regional School Board's meeting without a mask. Bossy told police as she was arrested and let out of the building, quote, "You're violating my rights right now." She said, "You're remiss. Come on, Sergeant Porter. You know this is wrong, what they're doing to our kids." So, I mean, this is kind of the state of the world right now. Boy, if you go against the government edict, you may face the consequences. There's more to the mask story, but I want to hit a few others as well. So I think this is more an issue of your own integrity. And a deeper level of responsibility. And sometimes decisions are very difficult. I think the idea of providing for your family, we should take that seriously. So if you're confronted with the realities, do you take the shot or do you keep your job? I'm not here to say what you would do or should do. For me, if I was in that situation, I may consider finding another job. Right? What is really the level by which you are going to go against your own conscience? By the way, for the sake of understanding, there is a push here that's false. I was reading an article the other day, 40 to 50% of the people at the CDC have not taken the shot. What does that tell you? Right? But there's this big push, or else don't go to church. Or else. I think on a spiritual battlefield, it's don't follow Jesus. Or else. Right? Are we all in for Christ? This is a spiritual battle, without a doubt, manifest in the physical realm. And maybe God is just calling us in this time. Maybe it's not about taking the vaccine at your job. Maybe it's not about the mask issue or a whole array of other things. Maybe it's about God calling you to a deeper relationship with Him, first and foremost. Maybe you've been trying to go it alone for a long time, or God, I got this. Jesus, I honor you, but your relationship is not absolutely all in. Like I began reading out of Matthew. When Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind." This is the great and first commandment. So it looks like a pending decision that literally involves decision-making. But maybe there's a deeper implication here that has to do spiritually with your walk with God. I'll say this. You can only deepen your walk with Christ. That will only benefit you in this very short thing we call life itself. All right, let's see here. Richard in L.A., they're forcing us to take the vaccine. No one is forcing you to do anything. They can coerce you and threaten you, but they're not forcing you. At least we don't live in that day and age right now. Elise and Aliso Viejo, the guy who called in about mandate vaccines at work, can file lawsuits or religious exemption. That is true, but that may not necessarily get him out of the situation at hand now. And there were a couple other calls on the screen, and they're not there anymore. So how do I want to end here? Let me look around. Yes, let's end with this. Pastor Jack Hibbs, many of us Appreciate him and the leadership that he has illustrated over the last year plus, or he has for many years at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. You may or may not know, recently there was a court ruling here in California that is permanently stopping our governor from locking down churches. Can't do it anymore. No restrictions. Pastor Jack Hibbs posted this the other day on Facebook. Follow Jesus. He is always right. Having terrorized California churches for over 1 year with his draconian and discriminatory COVID restrictions, Governor Gavin Newsom has now waved the white flag of surrender. In Liberty Counsel's case against him, we've obtained a permanent statewide injunction prohibiting him and the state of California from ever issuing another COVID restriction on any church in the state, unless that same restriction applies to everyone else. No more church closings, no more capacity limits, no more singing bans, no more masks, no more, not ever. Pastor Jack Hibbs writes, the church is once again free to be the church and to care for its people as the Lord leads it, not as government dictates. The Constitution has been fully restored and vindicated in California. Once approved by the court, this will be the first permanent injunction in the nation. It's taken us 1 year of vigorous and aggressive litigation in multiple courts at the same time to bring Newsom to this point of surrender. We lost initially at seemingly every turn. We were ridiculed by judges, lawyers, the media, even some misguided friends. But God, He orchestrated a miraculous turnaround, and suddenly our losses were turned into victory upon victory, leading us to this permanent injunction. Now, if God had stopped there and only given us this permanent injunction, it would have been enough, and He would have still deserved much glory, but He didn't. He made our victory even sweeter for the thousands of hours that Governor Newsom required us to spend to bring him to justice. He is now required to send Liberty Counsel a check for $1.35 million to reimburse for a portion of the enormous investment that many had to make to defend the church in California and across the land. I pray you have a blessed weekend. Lord willing, we'll be back here Monday for another program. In the interim, I pray blessings over you this weekend. And if you that are all compelled to email me, you're always welcome to send me a confidential email at franksontag@kkla.com. This is indeed the Frank Sontag Show.